February 2024. I understand this podcast is done a little bit later than usual. For those of you that are journeyman members right now, the INTJ lecture for this month was posted, and it was already posted already in the members portal. And the INFJ one should be posted tonight. So it is there. The INJ videos that we have for premium lectures, they're pretty good. Very, very good. Probably the best that I produced for the social skills season 12 part 2 that I've done yet. So I highly recommend you guys check that out. Very life-changing information. Very applicable, as well as like if you're a parent or a friend of an INJ. So I recommend you actually utilize the contents of the social skills lectures to challenge each other and improve each other. Just by virtue of how awesome they are. Today's cigar is Flor de las Antillas, my father cigars. It's my new favorite, although for some reason, I don't know what the difference is between this one and the one I just smoked. Because this one doesn't have as good of an air on it as the other ones do. But it's still good nonetheless. All right, so today's lecture I think is going to be extremely important as we're talking about sexual strategies and psychological type and how it matters. Oftentimes, we've been discussing the female sexual strategy of hypergamy, and everyone's aware of all the benefits, the pros and cons of hypergamy in general, because I've talked about it on seriously at length. With some of the recent discoveries that we've made about the science, we've made even crazier revelations about hypergamy, and that was recently presented to the men in the men's group for Magician Part 2, which was insanely good. It was a very good presentation for the men in the men's group. However, I did not really have as much time to actually discuss polygyny and how polygyny, the male sexual strategy, is affected by male psychological type, which is very, very important. So a little background. What is polygyny? The male sexual strategy of polygyny, it basically puts women into two separate categories in the same way that hypergamy also puts men into two separate categories. From a hypergamy perspective, men fulfill one of the two categories of hypergamy primarily, whereas the male sexual strategy of polygyny can put any woman in any circumstance into any of the two categories just based on how a woman behaves, basically. Whereas hypergamy is different. It's not necessarily about how men behave, in as much as is what men that a woman can see, what she can perceive off of a man can actually help her optimize her sexual strategy, basically. And it's mostly related to a man's natural talent. His natural talent as a man, based on his psychological type, based on his UCT, basically. So this lecture is UCT part 3, basically. This is all UCT based to a point. Although I'm not going to be directly talking about UCT within the context of this lecture very much. Not much. But I might bring it up. Thing is I have to provide additional context about polygyny and the two categories that men put women in. But before I do that, hypergamy, the two categories of hypergamy that women put men is female stress relief or female pleasure, basically. And based on a woman's UCT, you can figure out which side of her hypergamy in the moment that she prefers, essentially, to receive from a man. Pretty simple. I go into depth on it during Magician Part 2, but I'm going to go even deeper into it in the Ego Hacking Love course, which is just around the corner. It's over halfway done, being filmed, and we still have a little bit more. Got to do a lot of, basically the rest of the lectures is just a lot of whiteboarding that I'll be doing. But this lecture is not, this cutting edge is not really about hypergamy. We're not going to be really discussing it as much. We're going to be discussing polygyny because I haven't really had the opportunity to talk about the two categories that men put women into. So from the female perspective, a man is good at providing me stress relief, or a man is good at providing me pleasure. And 80% of men out there are predisposed, based on psychological type, to provide female stress relief, whereas the other 20% of men out there are predisposed with their natural behavior to specialize in female pleasure, basically. So men have these like specializations on which side of a woman's hypergamy that he is able to provide her within the context of their sexual relationship. Pretty simple, right? It's the basics of hypergamy. I've talked about it a million times. No need to go into more depth from here. However, polygyny is a little bit different. So men have two categories for women, and they all do this. All men do this, whether they're willing to admit it or not. They may not even be conscious of it, but it's fact. It's how their polygyny works. And the two categories are women that you put into the commitment category, or women that you put into the sex-only category, basically. And as the men know, within the context of the men's group, I teach men that pumping and dumping of women is wrong. That's unmanaged polygyny. And that when you're going to endeavor to get into a sexual relationship with a woman, you lead with commitment right off the bat. You lead with commitment. And then you allow her behavior within the sexual relationship to determine whether or not you stay committed to the woman, or she keeps your commitment, keeps your devotion. Devotion in the form of proof of devotion is taking care of a woman's needs, emotions, desires, and problems. Or if she's behaving in such a way where she's not reciprocating the time and attention and resources that you as a man give her, basically, if she's not reciprocating that, and the four reciprocations that men like to have reciprocated back to them as a result of giving a woman needs, emotions, desires, and problems are the four reciprocations, which are known as gratitude from the FI user women, appreciation from the FE user women, as well as peace, obedience, and representation. Okay? These are the four reciprocations, right? That women basically give to men in response to receiving time, attention, and resources in the form of needs, emotions, desires, and problems. I teach the men that if a woman is not giving the four reciprocations after you've given her time, attention, and resources, after you've given her devotion, then you have full rights to downgrade her into sex-only category. I just say to the men, explain this to her. You're like, hey, I'm moving you into sex-only category as part of my polygyny, and I'm going to start seeing other girls because I'm not having my needs met. My needs being the four reciprocations, because that's what men get out of having a sexual relationship with a woman. This gives you the opportunity as a man to empower a woman's choice, right? Because with women, choice is so important, because it's women who they're the ones who control access to sexuality, so they should always be given the choice, right? And then she has to make the choice. Okay, what do I to listen to you, her man? Say, okay, what can I do to reciprocate to you, to be able to get back into commitment category, right? With a male's polygyny. What can I do to stay secure, knowing that you are devoted to me, basically? This is very important for women to understand. And what this does is that this solves the problem of Men are conditioned on how to treat women, which is needs, emotions, desires, and problems, devotion, time, attention, and resources. But they are not conditioned on what to expect from women, the four reciprocations. Women are conditioned on what to expect from men, needs, emotions, desires, and problems, devotion, right? Masculinity. But they are not conditioned, they are not taught on how to treat men, which is the four reciprocations. Representation, obedience, peace, gratitude / appreciation, right? This is what women bring to the table for men. And again, I teach the men, if a woman is not providing those reciprocations that you would expect from her, well, then you have full rights, full justification to downgrade her into the sex-only category, basically. And let her know. You should let her know, because then she has the choice to either improve her status with you, basically, and qualify to you by giving you the four reciprocations, right? And then as a result of that, she can go back into a commitment category. Or if that's not happening, she stays in sex category. Or maybe she'll just tell you, you know what, screw you, I'm going to go be with someone else. Okay, sure, fair, no problem. The problem is that carries some risk with women. Because by going to another man, she's bringing all of the potential baggage that she has from her sexual past, plus her past with you, to that new relationship. And she is invariably reducing her value. So oftentimes women need to learn and understand that it's actually more valuable for them to stick around and work on being able to provide the four reciprocations in her sexual relationship to her man. Because think about it. If she moves on to a different man, she's still not going to be providing him the four reciprocations either. And then the same exact thing is going to happen to her, where he will lead with commitment, as he should, as men naturally do, lead with commitment. And then she'll be downgraded into sex-only category yet again. And then this perpetuates an endless downward spiral, an endless cycle of where she is consistently reducing her value until such time she's entirely used up as a woman and have very little to no value to men other than basically sex only, right? This is when women basically act like pump and dumps, essentially. They act like it. They act like hoes. They act low value, right? And not providing the four reciprocations, that can end up becoming a huge problem. A very big problem. So women making low value decisions oftentimes are not even aware that men leverage or levy these consequences upon women when it comes to their sexual relationships. Now, most men are conditioned to be monogamous, so they'll just end up breaking up with a woman and moving on to another woman. But if a man is honest and educated about his sexual strategy of polygyny, he'll give her the choice. And surprisingly, most women actually do stick around and try to improve their behavior because they know deep down, especially the older they are, that they have a lot to lose trying to, get with a different man and start over, basically. A lot of women, and the thing is that there's this concept known as the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy is basically when you as a man have invested so much time, attention, and resources and have taken care and invested so much devotion through the form of needs, emotions, desires, and problems to a woman that you end up sticking around for her even though she's not reciprocating. And a woman not reciprocating is an abusive relationship. Or a man not being devoted to a woman and being devoted to her needs, emotions, desires, and problems, guess what? That too is an abusive sexual relationship. Crusader men are oftentimes weak to the sunk cost fallacy, right? They can be pretty weak to it. Crusader men especially. I've known some philosopher men that do it too, but it's really bad for Crusader men. And they buy into this lie of sunk cost fallacy. But what's interesting about sunk cost fallacy is that psychologically speaking, sunk cost fallacy is actually a very feminine thing. It's actually a female thing. Because a woman gets so attached psychologically to her man at that point, that sunk cost fallacy actually applies to women. It does not really actually apply to men, because women have a lot more to lose psychologically when they have sex with men, and then they end up increasing their body count with men. They have a lot more to lose. A lot more. Oftentimes, earlier today I actually watched a TikTok about a woman who is talking about how, and she's like 21, and she's talking about how she wants to be with all these different men, and she wants to get piped by at least 100 men before she actually settles down, for example. And it's like, okay, you really want to do that? But she has no idea the consequences of her actions. It's kind of sad that it was actually an INTJ woman who was making that claim, right? Her little sexploration that she was doing, and has no idea that she's just building up baggage and baggage and baggage, and she's forever dooming herself, being all used up and whatnot, and being very low value, and having a reputation of being a hoe, and acting like a hoe, and acting like a pump and dump, that forever she'll be stuck in sex only category. And there's no way a high value man, no way in hell a high value man would actually make a mother or wife out of her. A low value man still might, but she'll be really unhappy for the rest of her life. So she's either looking at an unhappy relationship with a low value man, or she's looking at being alone forever, basically as a result of behaving that way, which is really sad. So that's basically how male polygyny as a sexual strategy actually works. You have these two categories, commitment and sex only, and a responsible man basically allows a woman's behavior to determine whether or not she is in commitment category or sex only category, basically. Sex only category is also known as concubines or concubinage, basically. Commitment category is, okay, well, this is my wife, I'm committed to her, right? That's commitment category. But a woman needs to understand that at all times, a man could put her in that position, could change which category she is in based on her behavior and let her know. Perhaps as it's happening, as he should, because he should be leading her as a man and being willing and not being too much of a pussy to provide that feedback to her. Because men who buy into the sunk cost fallacy, oh, I want to lose her, I don't want to lose her. Sunk cost fallacy harms men. It absolutely harms men. It harms their sexual strategy. Whereas sunk cost fallacy actually improves women and improves their hypergamy, because then all of a sudden sunk cost fallacy is this thing that actually helps women not perpetuate any more problems, not perpetuate fatherlessness, for example, because again, women are conditioned on what to expect from men, but they are not conditioned on how to treat men. And that sunk cost fallacy encourages women to continue to stick it out and learn how to become better women themselves for the sake of their man, as it should be, right? That's how it works, okay? Now that we have the foundation of how polygyny works, okay, because I haven't really been that direct on how polygyny actually works, right? Let's discuss some female fears relating to the male sexual strategy, okay? Let's talk about some of their fears that they have. Some of the fears is that their man may have multiple women, for example, or that they would have to compete, or that there's this jealousy factor. I was actually watching Legend of Korra last night, watching one of the characters who's an ISTJ, and his sexual strategy of polygyny come out because he couldn't choose between Avatar Korra or this other girl named Asami in season 1 of Legend of Korra, for example. And because he's following the social norm of monogamy, because a woman is to be monogamous to a man, that does not necessarily mean a man has to be monogamous with a woman due to the sexual strategy of polygyny. He's bought into this conditioning where he's been conditioned to be monogamous to a woman, the reason why is because men are not conditioned on what to expect from women, basically, right? As a result of their sexual strategy. This is where Rollo Tomassi makes the incorrect judgment that, when one person in a sexual relationship has to let go of their sexual strategy. Well, sure they do, if it assumes just monogamy. If you're making that assumption, that cultural norm of monogamy, then yes, one person has to surrender their sexual strategy when they're in a monogamous sexual relationship. Well, at least men do, but women don't, because the way hypergamy works, hypergamy is innately monogamous as a sexual strategy because the woman is just trying to optimize getting with the best, highest quality man. The highest quality man, okay? A man who can handle all of her female stress relief as well as bring her pleasure, right? Those two things. But men only specialize in one or the other. And very, very few men specialize in both and have the ability to specialize both. However, as men age, they gain the ability to specialize in both. That's why older men are more attractive to younger women, because they have the ability to, through learned behavior, to actually be able to fulfill both sides of a woman's hypergamy. That's how it works. But here's the kicker. Not all men are cognitively predisposed to being polygynous. There's different forms of polygyny. One of them is, as coined by my ESTP cousin, serial monogamy, basically, where he goes from one woman to the next, as if he's on this journey of finding a woman that he can be monogamous to, right? One woman at a time, basically. When in reality, this feminist culture projects the female sexual strategy onto men, and then he bought into that because that's how he was conditioned, that's how he was raised, basically. And because he bought into that, he assumed that he had a similar sexual strategy to women, and that he's just trying to optimize, his life based on, what's the best woman I can find, which woman is the least damaged, which woman can I commit to. And then they end up in sex-only category because he keeps getting disappointed over and over. And then he ends up breaking up with them, which happens over and over and over and over. And that actually ends up perpetuating the problem. That, too, is actually a form of unmanaged polygyny. By not giving women the choice, that, too, is unmanaged polygyny. Okay, that's a huge problem. It's actually psychologically abusive to women. You shouldn't do that. In as much as not leading with commitment right out the gate is also psychologically damaging to women, and it too is unmanaged polygyny, which I do not tolerate. I do not tolerate in men at all. So, but where comes Jungian analytical psychology? How does psychological type actually influence this? It influences it a lot. And this is a concept that came from Mr. Phibb, who was educating me on linear versus multilinear thinking. So let's look at cognitive functions. Let's look at perception functions. Perception functions, also known as sexual functions, okay? Extroverted intuition is multilinear. Extroverted sensing is multilinear. Introverted sensing is linear, okay? Introverted intuition is linear, okay? These are linear, okay? So if a man has extroverted sensing optimistic or extroverted intuition optimistic, he's very good at multilinear thinking. Now, these are the types of men psychologically, so let's look at that. So we have ENTJs, ENFJs, ESTPs, ESFPs, etc., right? Just looking at the extroverts, right? These extroverted men, of which I am one of them, versus the men who are introverted sensing optimistic and introverted intuition optimistic. INTJs, INFJs, ISTJs, ISFJs, right? Just looking at just the optimistics for today as an example, okay? What's the primary difference between these men? When it comes to the sexual strategy of polygyny, it's performed differently between these types. It's performed differently, okay? There's a huge difference in performance. Because men with linear thinking cannot handle, they usually can't handle having more than one woman simultaneously. They usually now through learned behavior they can get through this if they want to, if it's important to them. But naturally, linear men prefer to be committed and having just one woman in commitment category at a time. Multilinear men are naturally able to handle having multiple women in commitment category. It's actually possible. And then they have way less women in sex only category versus the linear men have way more women in sex only category, but then they just have really one that they devote to in commitment category. Okay? This is just natural behavior between the types. Okay? And we see this over and over and over. Whenever I talk about polygyny, it's not really women that complain to me about polygyny, not very much. I don't really get as many complaints from women as I do actually from men. And it's actually the linear men who are complaining to me about it the most. Most in particular, INTJ men. Or INFJ men. INJ men, they don't really like that. They don't really like the idea of having 2 or more wives. They just don't, which would indicate, multiple women in commitment category. Why? Because it stresses them out. It stresses them out big time. It's a lot of stress there. A huge amount of stress. Because they have to rely on their multilinear functions, but they are specialized in their linear functions, right? Like introverted intuition or introverted sensing, optimistic, right? They specialize in those functions. So it's actually really difficult for them to be able to facilitate multiple women in the commitment category. It's hard. It's really psychologically difficult for them. The reason why is you just look at the 4 reciprocations. It's very hard for them to keep the peace, as men are sources of peace in their home, and get that peaceful reciprocation from their women. It's really, really hard for the FE or the TE tricksters within ISJs or INJs. They really, really struggle with this. So these men are actually predisposed to being monogamous, naturally. They naturally are. And they're the ones that always are the ones getting in my face, sometimes INFPs and INTPs as well, get in my face over, or ISTPs and ISFP men as well, get in my face about, what are you talking about, Chase? That I should be having multiple wives? No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can, but given your psychological type, doesn't that sound really stressful to you? Like, well, yeah, it is stressful to me. So I'm probably not going to make that choice. And yeah, you're not going to make that choice. You're really not. You may have multiple girls that are in sex-only category, and you might, and chances are you probably won't. Because again, managing those girls in sex-only category, because this is where you get into Japanese culture where a man is devoted to one woman, right? But then it's perfectly socially acceptable for him to have a prostitute that he sees on the side, consistently, right? And that's because his sexual functions are linear, okay? So psychologically speaking, that's not really what he's going to do. He's not, in general, these men naturally are just not really interested in having multiple women in the commitment category. And even then, the prospect of having side action may also be really stressful to them. And this is why not all men prefer to have multiple wives, multiple women in committed category, because women that are in committed category, well, they're wives. They just are, regardless of legal status, okay? They just can't mentally deal with it, and it's too stressful to them. So the women out there that complain about this, I just, you don't really have much to worry about. You kind of don't really have that much to worry about, because a lot of men out there, at least half of men out there, don't really live their, and that's at least half, and it's actually more, just don't really want to deal with the stress. They just don't want to deal with the stress. And oftentimes, like the SI demons, they're trying to avoid stress as much as possible. So they're not likely to engage. I'm just here to inform people, this is what your sexual strategy is. This is how it works. Doesn't mean you have to do that. Doesn't mean, you're going to be a complete man and and as part of your enlightenment journey or your cognitive integration journey, that you'll be able to pull it off anyway because you're naturally inclined not to. So again, it's much ado about nothing. It really is. It doesn't matter that much. It doesn't. So ladies, you don't really have to be scared per se, because most men out there don't even want to live their lives that way. And then there's the multilinear approach. Men with extroverted sensing, optimistic, extrovert intuition, optimistic, these men are, they're okay with it. They're mentally built to be able to handle that stress of having multiple women in commitment category. And they would rather increase the quality of their devotion towards those women than have to deal with the women in sex-only category for the most part. Okay? That's in general how it works. So for all you men out there who are consistently complaining about Chase teaching polygyny, you have to understand that who's naturally inclined for it, who's mentally, naturally capable it's no wonder that King Solomon, who is an ENTP, who is, oh yeah, it's because I was called by a railgun. That's why. It's super annoying how sound cut out. But basically, just let me sum up there. She might call again, in which case I'm just gonna have to keep hitting the button. No, 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 no. Let's see, she likes to call me like 30 times in a row. It's annoying. But the point is, that in general, men have this issue where it's like, you don't have to keep getting mad at me about this, because you have to understand how psychological type influences natural behavior. Some men, based on their psychological type, are more in tune with being devoted to a one, right? Versus other men of other psychological types are more in tune with being devoted to the many, okay? That's basically the point I'm trying to get at here, folks. That is the point, okay? So ladies, you don't have to be so scared. Look at your psychological type, look at their psychological type, okay? You can make informed decisions, right? About who you open your legs to and who you don't, right? It's fine. And men, be aware of your psychological type. Be aware of what you're actually capable of. Because there's men out there who are multilinear thinkers, like my ESTP cousin, who is able to actually handle having multiple women in the commitment category, but because of his conditioning, he doesn't allow himself to. because of the social conditioning. And then he's actually selling himself short, potentially selling himself short. That's really what it comes down to. So organize your life around these concepts. Organize your life around your sexual strategy. Organize your life around psychological types so you actually know what you're good at. You actually know what your limitations are. Or you actually know which limitations you should not allow to be thrust upon you, basically. This is absolutely critical when understanding sexual strategies. Because linear versus multilinear absolutely matters when it comes to sexual relationships. It is absolutely required. Gentlemen, you have to know this. Ladies, you have to know this. It's very critical, especially when it comes to parenting your sons and your daughters. You have to know this information so that you can guide them properly for their sexual decision making, so that they can have the absolute best future and the best relationships themselves. So that you can be aware of what's out there, what's available to you. What actual limitations are there psychologically for you as a man, basically, within your sexual strategy, or which limitations shouldn't be on you because you might be a multilinear thinker versus linear thinker, in terms of your sexual functions, okay? That's the main point. No, I cannot explain the same with women and hypergamy. That's not how it works. Women are predisposed, regardless of their type, to be monogamous with one man. Monogamous to that man. That doesn't mean that man has to be monogamous to her because of his sexual strategy of polygyny, but psychologically, most men can't handle having multiple women in commitment-only category anyway, okay? So, because it's just too stressful to their brains. They're just not, maybe if they're really, really old, maybe when they're in their 50s, they could probably pull that off. But in reality, that's not really going to be, that's not, they just have to know the limitations and know how society or social norms are limiting them as well. And then make an informed choice about how to conduct their sexual strategy of polygyny. That's what I'm getting at. Okay, so I saw a question, so I'm going to scroll up. Why I have 2 girlfriends when I can have 2 martial arts? Okay, yeah, good point, Sam. So, women just want the complete man. The complete man, a complete man is a man who can provide female stress relief and female pleasure at the same time. The problem that women have is that 80% of men specialize in female stress relief, and the other 20% of men specialize in female pleasure. And how you determine what a man specializes in is based on his octagram, or how you determine based on whether or not a woman wants female stress relief or female pleasure is based on her octagram. Okay, but I'm not going to explain how that actually works. That will be explained in the upcoming course, Ego Hacking Love. Or, if you're a man and you want to find out the answer to that question, join the men's group and listen to the Magician Part 2 presentation that I give, which actually explains that in a little bit more detail, but you have to rank up and earn the right to be able to listen to those episodes. So, and to do that, make sure you join the Sexuality SIG on our Discord, which is discord.gg/egohackers. Get into the Forge, aka the men's group, and then from there, you can then rank up and then gain access to those private presentations for the men's group so you can get educated. So, but yeah, folks, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the stream right now. That is basically the contents of this lecture. That is the contents of this lecture. I'm done with the lecture now. I'll end the stream if there are no actual questions. Just giving you guys an opportunity. Oh, I think I saw a question. Oh, the link. Thank you, Sam, for being awesome as always. The greatest ego butler in the world. God bless you, sir. Also, the best hatchet man we've ever had. Love you, bro. Fucking love you, bro. All right, no questions. Sounds good. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next month on the Cutting Edge Podcast, March 2024. Later.